Hey, we are the Way Out Recovery, and I want to remind everyone we're an intensive outpatient program located right here in Santa Clarita on the corner of Plum and Bouquet Canyon. If you're in that area and you're in absolute crisis, see if we're over there. We are not sitting in the office as much as we used to be because we're not doing really walk-ins. Although if you're over there, come see if we're in the office, knock on the door, and we will absolutely see you. I do want to let you know that we are 100% available for any calls. We are open for business. We are running groups. We are doing everything that we can to help people through this double crisis in our world. Double crisis, right? We got COVID-19, but we also have in our world the more pressing issue of addiction, and drug use. And so we are open and conducting business and waiting for your calls at 661-296-4444. You can also visit our website at thewayOutRecoverySCV.com, and you can submit for a couple of different things, free confidential assessments, and you can also submit for online communication or appointments on our website as well. Again, that's the WayOutRecoverySCV.com, and our phone number is 661-296-4444. When we come back after this short break, we're going to talk to you about some really scary things that are taking place in the already scary world of addiction and drug use and mental health. So when we return, we will talk about that. I'm Bob Sharits in studio with Melissa Flowers. The Way Out Recovery Hour. We'll be right back.
And now, a cooking tip from Keith Mowry from Bob's Country Meats. Ribs were made for the barbecue, but here's a great cooking tip.
The best way I like to cook the ribs is in the oven, cover them about an hour, 350, then put them on the barbecue for about 15 to 20 minutes, turn them a few times just to get them nice and brown.
Ribs, chicken, tri-tip, pork chops, turkey, steaks, even exotic game like buffalo and ostrich. For the tastiest ribs in town, visit Bob's Country Meats on Soledad in Canyon Country.
Hi, this is Kirk Stinson with Plumbing by Kirk, your hometown plumber. By this time, you should know where all your gas and water shutoff valves are in case of an emergency. If you don't, you should call Plumbing by Kirk. Our friendly staff will be more than happy to set an appointment for one of our technicians to come to your home and clearly mark all your shutoff valve locations. We invite you to visit our website for free plumbing advice at plumbingbykirk.com or give us a call, 263-6519. That's 263-6519.
My dad is the best plumber ever. Plumbing by Kirk.
A social distancing tip.
While the CDC urges you to avoid close contact, like hugging or shaking hands, there are other non-physical ways to say hello. Wave, wink, use sign language, salute, smile, give the peace sign, throw up an air high five, do jazz hands. Remember, stay a minimum of 6 feet or 2 arms length away from others, and stay home if you can. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council. Social distancing slows the spread of coronavirus, so we should all stay home to lower the risk for everyone. More info at coronavirus.gov. Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Your hometown station.
Our news team at KHTS is constantly working to keep you informed. If you want the latest and greatest information on the Santa Clarita Valley, just sign up for the KHTS newsletter. SCV News delivered directly to your email inbox every weekday by 5 p.m. and a special weekend edition on Sundays. All it takes is an email address and you're set. Go to hometownstation.com to register.
98.1 FM and AM 1220.
Got no excuses.
Welcome back to the Way Out Recovery Hour. I'm Bob Sharits in studio today with Melissa Flowers. We're going to talk about a few things in terms of increases in numbers. numbers of overdose deaths, numbers of mental health cases, numbers of addiction cases, decrease in access to treatment, lack of funding now for county, state, and federally run programs, decreases in funding for research into advances in medicine for addiction. We're going to look at all those numbers, but I think the first thing that I want to do, and I don't even know if this platform is going to reach this audience that I'm going to talk to. I want to talk to the actively using the actively using addict right now. And what I want to say to you is I know that the world of obtaining drugs is changed. People are not out like they were. You know, when we go out in public and we go to, let's say, a restaurant, or in this, you know, or if we go to, like, if we were going to go to a gym, or if we were going to go to a hair salon or a nail salon or whatever. And all these things that we used to do and just take for granted, in the world of drug use, it's the same. I got a connection. I got 5 connections. I have a place that I go. I have a price that I pay. I have my usual, you know, right? Like if you go to a restaurant you go to all the time, you know, hey, Fred, give me my usual, right? It's the same thing. And when you live in a world of using drugs, or if you've grown up like that, like I used drugs my whole life, and so that world was the same as somebody going buying a shake from McDonald's. I'm going to buy, you know, I'm going to buy a shake from Chewy's.
Right.
From whoever, right? And but I know who I'm buying from, and I know what I'm getting, and I know where I'm going. Well, restaurants have changed their protocols now. A lot of them are not doing in-house dining. Maybe they're outside. A lot of them are not even open, or you have to call ahead, right? And so and salons and gyms and all that stuff closed. Like it's not even open. Well, the world of drugs is doing the same thing. You know, you can't just go down to wherever because they're not standing there no more, you know, and you can't just call up so-and-so because the supply has changed. You know, the monitoring of borders and the travel and stuff is very closely monitored to stop the spread of COVID-19. But also in that, people are being questioned more if they're traveling between countries or they're traveling here and there. And so the drug supply chains have dramatically changed. And so it's not as readily available. So what happens in the world of drugs when that happens? People who transport or move or sell or make a living off of illegal substances are going to keep that going no matter what. COVID or no COVID, they're going to keep that going. People who have crossed the line into addiction and need that drug are going to keep that going no matter what. So what's happened is the quality of drugs and what they're being made out of and how they're being obtained and who we're getting them from is completely changed. If I'm an actively using drug addict and I need my drug and my connections are not available, I'm going to go to anyone and get it.
Right.
What has happened as a result of that is more people are dying. There was already enough people dying. There's tons of overdoses happening all the time, right? Now that's increased dramatically because what's available on the street is going to be more of things like the synthetic fentanyls and the cut drugs and the garbage, the really garbage drugs. I mean, you know, people who have never been in that world view drug use and drug addicts as like, ooh, and scumbags. But I like good drugs.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, like I don't want to buy the garbage. I want the good stuff, right? And when I say that, there's a certain quality to it. If you're an actively using drug addict and you're doing drugs all the time, you can tell the difference between the good stuff and the not good stuff, right? And so I'm looking for a quality product, but that's not available. And so I'm willing to take whatever is out there. And what's happening in that is that people are dying. They're getting these fentanyl products and they're getting these weird different kinds of methamphetamines that are being made and different cuts and stuff in their drugs, and it's killing people more than it was before. So the message that I want to send, if anybody who's an actively using drug addict is using, is use discernment in that. I know it's hard to do. I know that you need your drug, but be really especially overly careful in what you're doing. You can't do the same amount of heroin that you were doing before if you don't know what's in it. Right? So, go easy. Be careful. And maybe that message saves a life or two. Maybe somebody's going to hear that message and go, okay, I'm not going to go get it from so-and-so, or, I'm going to ask some questions, or I'm going to be real careful with it, or I'm going to look at it before I buy it or whatever, so that they don't die. Increase in overdoses. I want to ask you a couple of questions about overdose, Melissa. When we think of overdose, we oftentimes think of opiates for good reason, right? Most of the overdose deaths that take place are as a result of some sort of an opiate or a painkiller, or whether it's a prescription or it's heroin. It's going to be an opiate. Those are the deaths. But overdoses occur not just with opiates. So when we talk about overdoses, it's not just opiates. There are others. I hate to call it a drug of choice, but that's the common language out there, is drug of choice, and people have asked me, it's funny, I go into the world personally as a recovery person, and I meet new people, and somebody will ask me, hey, what was your drug of choice? And I will say to them, my response is, and I hate to, we joke about drug use, but for people who don't know, they go, oh my God, how can you joke about that? But my response to what was your drug of choice is, oh, I have to choose?
Yes, I know, I've heard you say that.
Like I have to choose one or the other, because I'm like what you would consider maybe a garbage can or something. Like I'll do anything, right? But my preferred drug was methamphetamine. We all click with a different drug, and that's what lit me up, man. That's what lit my fire. That's what did it for me. And maybe that's because I'm an ADHD kid. Maybe that stimulant tuned me in, and my brain just said, yep, that's the one for me. Cocaine was your drug of choice, correct?
Correct. My preferred drug, you mean?
See how easy it is to do that, right? And so the preferred drug, if I had them all lined up in front of me, I'm grabbing the speed, and you're grabbing the crack, right?
The crack, the crack.
Yeah, so you're grabbing the smokable cocaine, right?
Yes.
The crack cocaine. Have you ever overdosed on that stuff before?
It's funny because I always thought, I associated overdose, first of all, not even with opiates, but with needles. Like I thought, you have to be an IV drug user to
Okay, so let's clarify that real quick, yes. Because I've seen people overdose smoking heroin, right?
Exactly,
or
taking pills.
Or taking pills. And so clarify that. You do not have to. In fact, I would gather to say that maybe most of the majority of overdoses are probably not from intravenous drug use.
But
although
that was my conception of it. Like I had this idea, and there's this group I do on it, like Crossing the Line, and I thought I was safe as long as I didn't shoot anything or use intravenously.
So one of the things that the brain will do to here's what happens is when you cross a line into addiction, your brain considers that the most important thing in your life, right? And so what it will do is it will use all of its defenses to try to push back anything that might be a threat to this thing that it considers the most important thing in its life. And so our brain will do this thing where it it will justify or make okay the thing that I'm doing now, the addictive behavior that I'm doing now, by saying, well, at least I'm not doing the A, B, or C, right?
That's exactly,
crossing the line.
That's always. I mean, and of course, every line I set, I started to cross, and then.
But what does that look? But what does that look like? At least I'm when you first start doing cocaine, it's like at least I'm only doing lines. I'm not smoking it or something.
What's funny is when I started smoking, I started with marijuana and alcohol, and it was like, oh my gosh, people putting things up their nose. Ugh, at least I only smoke pot.
At least I'm not doing hard drugs.
Exactly. And then I tried, doing a line of cocaine, and I was like, oh my gosh, look at the people smoking it.
So this is the clarification show. So watch this.
Sorry.
Watch this. No, this is the clarification show for those who are listening who listen to that, right? If you are out there and you're using marijuana or alcohol, and you're justifying that by saying, or if you're a parent whose kid is smoking pot or drinking, and you're saying, well, at least they're not using hard drugs.
Yes.
I want to clarify, since this is the clarification show now, right? Alcohol causes more problems than any other drug in the world except for nicotine. Let me repeat that. Alcohol causes more problems in the world. More deaths, more injury, more medical problems, more mental health issues, more problems than any other drug in the world except for nicotine. So it is the harder drug. But when we're using it, when we first start off, and most people start with alcohol. They start with one of three things.
Yeah, a lot of people think that marijuana.
Nicotine, marijuana, alcohol.
Yeah.
Right.
Alcohol was definitely.
Alcohol is a bigger gateway.
Yeah.
You know why alcohol is more prevalent as a starting drug than any other? Because it's right in the refrigerator, man. It's right there in the home. Yeah, it's sitting there.
Well, and that's the other thing too is. I mean, I could go into a whole list of things we don't have time for, but ultimately in all of the drug use and all of the cocaine and all of the crack and all of the meth and all of the drugs I did, I never got in as much trouble as I did when I was drinking.
Right.
And that's just the truth.
Well, and that is the truth. When I look back, I've got, and this is public knowledge, so I'm not outing myself, I've got a significant criminal history, mostly around drugs and alcohol. And so I've been arrested a lot for possession of drugs or being under the influence or selling drugs or whatever. But when I look at the stuff that included any kind of violence or where people got hurt, it was always alcohol related.
Always. Yeah.
I drink and I get 10 feet tall and I think nothing, I feel like I'm bulletproof or something, and it's gotten me in a lot of trouble. Plus this thing happens when I drink where a part of my brain shuts off and I think that I can do anything.
Well, yeah, and I think that's what happens to most people. And you feel like the justification, and I'll go back to how I progressed into crossing the line, but that's the thing. When I stopped doing the let's just call them the hard drugs, right? Because I was still drinking. But when I stopped the cocaine and stopped the crack and stopped the marijuana and stopped everything, I thought, oh, geez, that was really getting in my way. Now I can drink normally because I don't have a problem with drinking. In my head, that's what
now
I
I could just
myself.
be a social drinker like everybody else.
And so I did that for about 4 years, just drinking, and I kept getting in a little more trouble until I ended up in prison over drinking. I hadn't used what people would consider a hard drug in 4 years. And ultimately, alcohol is what took me down and brought me to surrender to everything.
Right.
It wasn't necessarily the crack or the cocaine or what we do to get our drugs. It was the drinking. And it's very easy to cross that line from, smoking a little pot to maybe trying a little cocaine to, oh, they're smoking it. Okay, I'll try smoking it. And before you know it, you've crossed every line you've set in front of you. And I mean, there are lines I didn't cross. But yet, I mean, if I was out there, I don't know what I would do.
Yeah, in the world of recovery, we call those yets.
I just haven't crossed them.
I haven't gotten there yet.
But I can tell you, ultimately, to answer your question, is that I always thought you had to be an IV drug user to overdose. Then when I got a little bit older and a little more familiar and I saw people overdose, I realized in my head, it was just opiates. That's what I thought. It's just opiates. Any kind of way you take an opiate. Until one day I was using cocaine, I was smoking it, and I had like a mini stroke.
Got it.
And I remember the whole side of my body went numb. And I went to the hospital, and they did tests on me, and they said, okay, we're seeing signs.
Of a stroke?
Yeah, I got so... I didn't want them to know I was under the influence, which is funny now because I'm sure they knew I was under the influence. Yeah. But I left. I left like that. And I went back and I finished doing the drugs I had. in the middle of a mini stroke. And my mom, I don't know if she listens to this show or not, but she had to come take care of me, shower me. I couldn't talk. I couldn't anything for a couple days. And I still continued to use.
In that state?
In that state. I had to have somebody else help me get high. You know, like just now I think back and I'm like, wow, how intense is the drug that in the middle of a stroke or a mini stroke or a mild stroke that I continue to use.
And I want people to pay attention to that because I think I'm under the impression, and I don't know that this is true, it's an assumption that I've made, is that most people who listen to this show are probably personally don't have
Correct.
They're not addicts.
I would think
right?
they're listening for a loved one.
And so they listen,
Curious.
and so they listen, and they're like, "Oh my God! Like, how horrible is that?" And if you're thinking, because here's what I used to do when I would, I don't know, have a moment of clarity after living a month or two, like you're just describing, where everything has just fallen apart, and I'm still doing the drug, and then something happens to intervene in my life where I can't do it anymore, and I stop and I get these moments of where I can look at what just happened, and I go, "Oh my God, I'm such a horrible person," right?
It's easy to look back.
It is right, but it is. One of the things that's important for people to understand is that drug addiction is no reflection on the personal morals, values, or character of the person who's using the drugs.
Can you re-say that? Because that's like so important, and it's so hard for family to differentiate between the person that you are and the drug use. Could you say
it's hard for even the drug users. My point too, right, is that nobody beat me up more than I beat myself up for my drug use, and I used to go, "Stupid, bad, crazy, you're such an idiot,"
well, and that's
none
what
of that
fuels
was
the
true.
Continued use, right?
Right.
My continued use. I'm already such a
because if I stop, I have to look at that.
Yeah, or I'm already such a mess up. You know, like every time I would start to get sober, everything would hit me at once. All the things I'd done, all the things I'd failed to do, all the accomplishments that I let go to waste. And just to get through that, I need to use just a little more. So I don't have to feel all the shame of everything.
Well, what's interesting is there's we talk about a line, crossing a line into addiction, right? And maybe that's a line, and maybe it's this slow, long path. I don't know, you know what I mean? But at some point, the brain has truly crossed into a line of addiction. And the difference between those two people, somebody who is and somebody who is not an addict or has moderate or severe substance use disorder, as the DSM-5 would qualify that, is that those kind of experiences where I have so much shame for what I just did, if I am not an addict, if I have not crossed that line, that will actually motivate me to not do it again.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult to tell. But if I have crossed into a line into addiction, or if I am that shame-prone person, what that can do is it can make my behavior worse. It makes it worse, right? And we can do that as loved ones if we're not careful for the people that we love, right? Yeah. And that's not just with drug use, but any kind of behavior where if your loved one is a shame-based rather than a guilt-prone, right? Which means the difference between that, and there's some different thoughts on that, but the difference between guilt-prone and shame-prone is this, is that guilt-prone the shame is still the emotion.
Yeah.
But guilt-prone is this, is that I'm embarrassed by what I just did, and I hope nobody saw it, and I feel the same thing, but it can motivate me to say, oops, I've made a mistake, and I have to be more careful so I don't make that mistake again. If you're a shame-based person, right, and you carry around that shame, that same exact scenario, the thought process is, oh my God, I'm so ashamed of what I did. I am such a bad person.
Right.
I am a mistake. I always do everything wrong.
Right.
I'll never get it right, right?
Yeah,
if you're
me.
if you're that person right there, and the leaning towards one or the other of that happens in childhood. So if somebody we love is getting in trouble, or they're not learning from their mistakes, or they're unable to follow direction, pay attention to that, because your approach on how you help them change is going to be different. If you punish them and you yell at them and you shame them, what happens is that person now does not feel safe to let you know that they're making mistakes,
Right.
and they will take those mistakes into secrecy. So it exacerbates the problem, right? It makes it worse, and it's really important for people to understand. Again, that if you're listening to this and you don't understand addiction and you're thinking, my God, Melissa, you had a stroke from smoking crack and you
Right.
still kept doing it, that type of behavior is absolutely no reflection on personal character, on morals,
Right.
on values. It is a disease, and that disease takes over. And it's really important to clarify that, so that if you don't understand it personally,
Yeah.
like experientially, at least you can understand the power of addiction.
Well, I think that's what people fail to understand is there's a lot. I mean, I have conversations all day, every day with family members, or even with people getting information for a friend or a loved one or whatever. And the common misconception is, but I don't understand, they got in trouble. Like, why do they keep using?
Why do they keep getting in trouble?
Yeah. So,
Right?
I mean, to have that conversation, and I've done panels before, and I've talked to families before, and I've done AA before, where I share my story, and sometimes that comes up, or sometimes different aspects of my recovery come up. But there's always a story about how something bad happened and I kept going.
Right.
Whether that's with my kids or with the stroke or with going, getting in trouble or whatever, relationships. And it's always the same thing I continued to use to
Right.
get past that. And I've had people question me like, oh my gosh, how could you do that? And it's like, it wasn't me. I mean, it was ultimately, but the disease of addiction was that strong that it just seemed like that was the only way to get through everything, was to continue to use. And you talk about the difference between addict and not addict and crossing the line. And I thought the people I partied with when I was younger, the people I got high with, the people who smoked crack with me, the people who did, I always thought were all addicts. Like, once I learned about addiction, I thought, well, we're all addicts. You're smoking crack. You must be an addict. And I have a very dear friend that I've known since I was 11 or 12, and we both did drugs the same way. If not, she did more and had more access to it. And we separated for a while. When we came back, here I am, full-blown drug addict, and she's got a family and kids, and she found out she fell in love and wanted a family and stopped.
It was enough. The motivation,
and it
yeah.
was completely
Yeah.
enough. And here I was thinking we're the exact same, and we're not. The motivation to want to do better was enough for her to go, okay, leave that behind. I've outgrown it, and I was still in it in my 20s, and having kids and not able to stop, and getting in trouble and not able to stop. And so it's funny to look back and go, you mean you weren't a drug addict? Like, I didn't get it.
Yeah.
I did not understand how we used the same, but yet we weren't the same.
Well, what's interesting about that is something like 80% of people who use drugs will not.
I know, it baffles me.
Most people who use drugs, even if they look like, oh my God,
Yeah.
this guy's off the hook, right? Most people who use drugs will have some experience happen in their life where they go, okay, I'm done.
I
and they can
know.
just that easy be done, right?
I don't understand the given
Yeah.
sufficient enough reason. I don't, it's hard for me to comprehend that. I mean, obviously I'm sober. I'm sitting here for a reason. Something happened significant in my life that altered my thinking, but it wasn't the first thing that happened, and it sure as heck wasn't, the second thing or the third thing. It was, a decade and a half later when I was like, oh, okay, this isn't, this is serious.
Yeah.
But all the things that I walked through that, I guess, I don't know if you call them normal people, that non-addicts would experience, that would be enough for them to say, like, whoa, what am I doing? And so it's interesting that 80% of people or greater, do not have that. And so it's hard for me to comprehend that, because I thought everybody who ever used a drug was a drug addict. That was my understanding of it. And so as I grow and learn, whether it's from you or from the education that I had, when I went to school to be a counselor, I mean, I take all the information and I just absorb it, because it's so much that I didn't know about addiction.
Well, we have such misinformation, and
Such misinformation.
and we are, we make assumptions about it. Same, is I found out that a lot of the people that I got high with growing up did not end up having lifelong problems because of drugs and alcohol.
Right.
They just were able to manage it or put it behind them. And then some I never imagined, have had really significant problems, and the problem with the drug that I did So I died twice in 1 year from overdoses. One from methamphetamine, and one from ketamine, which is a whole nother.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother drug. It's a cat tranquilizer.
Yeah.
Right. But we used to go to Tijuana and pick it up from the veterinarian, and then come back and do that. I overdosed. I died on that stuff as well, and neither time I went to the hospital, but. What was interesting about it was, for some reason, I woke up the next day.
Right.
Both of them killed me.
Yeah.
And I came out of that, and I don't know how or why or whatever happened on that, but it was not what I thought would happen with methamphetamine. I was, forced to eat a bunch of it. I didn't mean to, but I thought I was being chased by the cops, and I was like tripping. And so I took the whole thing and I ate it, and it broke open inside of me and flooded my system with more than a person can ever do. And rather than I thought I would get, it's a stimulant, so I thought I would get more energy. I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna explode. My heart's gonna explode or something. The exact opposite happened to me. Like, I started to get that, and then I got super tired, and then I passed out, and I woke up the next day in place, going, whoa, like, what happened, but with methamphetamine, people they have heart attacks, and they have strokes, and they have all kinds of stuff.
Cocaine too.
But the worst thing about it is it's almost like a sustained overdose where people slowly go crazy with methamphetamine.
Yeah.
They slowly lose their minds with methamphetamine. And I would gather to say, I haven't done the research on this, and so I don't know that it's the truth, but I can almost guarantee you that if you go out and walk the streets and find the homeless community that looks like or acts like or has symptoms of schizophrenia.
Yeah.
That's, that they're my age. So I'm 52. So right around 50-ish or something, that are walking around, and they're the ones that, my own personal opinion, like, I'm afraid to approach them because they're screaming at traffic and they're just babbling to themselves, and they're out there, right? That if you took the time to talk to them, I can guarantee you that they're the methamphetamine people of my generation. Yeah. Because that was the popular drug when I was in my 20s and 30s. And methamphetamine was everywhere back then. It was the drug of the United States.
Yeah, I think it's making a comeback.
Well, it is making a comeback, which is scary, because what we're doing is we're breeding a whole new generation of schizophrenic, affect, right?
It's interesting, though, that, I'm sure all drugs, it's a possibility, but I know with methamphetamine, because I did that for quite a while before cocaine, and the effects of the hallucinating and the paranoia, like, sometimes that doesn't go away. And I know even with me, even though I'm blessed to not have long-lasting effects mental health-wise, I do have some. There are times where I'm like, anybody hear that? Oh, okay. Now, it's not bad, like, I think someone's coming for me anymore, but just enough to where nothing's there. So I do believe there are lasting effects that just don't ever go away. That hyper-anxiety and that paranoia that someone's always behind you, that feeling, it doesn't always go away. And so, yeah, I think that there are long-lasting effects, and methamphetamine was big when I was younger, too.
And what's scary about it is you never know. It's one of those things, like, you've heard about people.
Might never come back from it.
Right? It's one of those things you hear about, like hallucinogenics, like LSD. Like, it hardly ever happens, but people go, oh, man, you might have a bad trip and never come back. And you go, whatever, right? But it does happen. But with methamphetamine, what's interesting about it is that you can't predict who's going to have those lasting effects and who's not.
Exactly.
Relatively. I'm not going to say 100% because I'm like you, right? Like, I'm still tripping on some level, right?
Yeah.
But relatively, I have recovered. My brain has recovered from years of methamphetamine use. Almost 100% recovered.
Me
like,
too.
I have my wits about me. I have memory. I can complete a sentence. I can think straight. They're not following me. I don't think I'm going to get abducted by aliens. I don't think, whatever, right? I don't have the paranoia and the conspiracy stuff going on like I did, right? But I have a lot of people that I used with that it never changed for them.
Yeah.
that happened to them. A lot of them were hospitalized. A lot of them were diagnosed with schizophrenia. A lot of them were medicated as if they were schizophrenic, and in some sort of a series of events or a slow trickle into, they now are schizophrenic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they don't do the drug anymore.
And that's the scary part.
And they don't do the drug anymore, and that stuff stuck around,
And that's
it's
the
not
scary
going anywhere,
part.
right? That's hard, man. That's hard.
I also know that. That's really scary. But as far as overdosing too, what I tell a lot of our participants and a lot of people I talk to is that it is more probable that if you've had some time sober, and you go out trying to use the same way you came in using, a lot of overdoses happen that way.
A lot of overdose deaths happen that way.
Because your body and your mind don't match. Your mind's telling you, oh, go buy that 80 you were buying before you went in, and your body's been sober for a while, so it can't handle the amount that it used to in that moment. And so a lot of people that die, they've been sober for a minute. Now, maybe they weren't actively working a program or in AA or any of that, but they've had some time off of the drug, and they go back and their brain wants them to use the way they used to. And so your brain and your body don't match when you do that, and you die. And so, you have to be cautious of that. If you've had some time sober and you're going out, which, obviously I'm not encouraging that, but don't go using the same thing you used to use. Right. Don't do that. You might not make it.
So if you're listening to all this and you're thinking, oh my God, how do I get sober in all of this? How do I get recovery? How do I get help in all of this? When we come back, we're going to take a break right now, but I want to, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Right now is the toughest time probably in a long time of history to get sober. Funding is being cut. People's insurance is being cut. Treatment is not available like it was. It's just a mess as far as really the world, but as far as the world of mental health and substance abuse go, it's tougher than ever right now, which leads to putting in more of an effort. So when we come back, I want to talk about that effort that we have to put in and what are some right now tools that we can use, because we'll have a few minutes when we come back before we end the show.
Okay.
I'm Bob Sharits with Melissa Flowers, the Way Out Recovery Hour. We'll be back in a minute.
You see so much when you look at your child. A creative spirit that surprises you every day. Curiosity that develops into exploring unique passions. A little leader growing every day to discover who they are, what they love, and how they can make their mark on the world. At SCVI, we see those same amazing things. Our tuition-free K-12 charter school gives your child boundless opportunities to think critically and imagine freely, with a customized learning program built around each individual student. As iLead's founding school, SCVI combines an immersive approach to traditional subject learning with extracurricular activities, including STEAM, robotics, theater, music, and sports. SCVI has the only international baccalaureate program in Santa Clarita, with a 10-year proven track record of graduates excelling at top universities. And we're in your backyard, just off the 5 freeway in West Santa Clarita Valley in Castaic. For enrollment information or to learn more about our program, including homeschool options, visit iLeadSantaClarita.org. iLead Schools, free to think, inspired to lead.
Aloha, friends. Go check out Honu Coffee, home of the best cold brew coffee. What makes their coffee special is how their organic coffee beans are infused with nitrogen to create a smooth and delicious cup of coffee. You'll also find traditional bold coffees and island-inspired signature drinks. They're the perfect place to catch up with friends or just relax with your favorite cup of joe. Honu Coffee on Lyons and Walnut in Newhall. Stop by and say aloha.
And now for your convenience, a second Honu location at 23502 Lyons Avenue between Peachland and Apple.
Social distancing slows the spread of coronavirus, so we should all stay home to lower the risk for everyone. More info at coronavirus.gov. Let's all do our part, because we're all #alone together. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
I got no excuses for all of these goodbyes. Call me when it's over, 'cause I'm dying inside. Wake me when the shakes are gone and the cold sweats disappear. Call me when it's over and myself has reappeared. I don't know do it every time. It's only when I'm low.
Welcome back to the Way Out Recovery Hour. I'm Bob Sharits in studio with Melissa Flowers today. And you know, when you and I get in the studio together and we start talking about all this stuff, it's really good for the listeners to hear it, because we're depicting a true picture of what's happening in the world of drugs, right? And the big message in that is this, is that if you are trying to recover, it's going to take, and I've told people this before, achieving lasting recovery in the world of drug addiction is going to be the most difficult thing that you will ever do in your life. It'll also be the most rewarding thing you ever do in your life. Nothing will compare. You know, when I'm having the worst day in the world, the worst, absolute worst day in the world today, what I can always lean on is that I'm sober today and I have a chance to get through whatever's going on in my life. If I was getting loaded today, it would be 100 times worse,
Right.
and I wouldn't be able to even look at my problems, right? My so-called problems in my life. So it is absolutely the most rewarding thing that I've ever done in my life. My sobriety and being sober and the way that I feel about that is the absolute best thing in my life. And I would gather to say that anybody who's in lasting recovery would say the same thing. But make no mistake about it, you're not just going to wish you were sober and that's going to work.
Yeah, I tried
You're not
that.
just going to hope I could change and that's going to work. It doesn't work that way. You're not just going to talk about it and then it's going to change. You have to do something about it, and you have to do something about it every single day.
Yeah.
Every day has to be focused on that recovery. It's the same thing as other diseases. Here's an example of it. If you are recovering and in recovery from diabetes, it doesn't mean that your diabetes has gone away. What it means is that you are living a life that accentuates your recovery from diabetes.
Right.
Translated into this, you're seeing your doctor on a regular basis, you're eating and exercising in a healthy manner, you are checking your blood sugar, you're making sure that everything that you do goes through the filter of, I'm living with diabetes.
Right.
And I have to think about that before I go to that cake party.
Right.
Or before I go on a trip and don't take my insulin with me or whatever, right?
Right.
Same thing in recovery, except that the insulin equates to whatever your recovery program is.
Right.
If I'm going to that wedding, I better have some phone numbers. You know,
Exactly.
I better have a big book with me. I better have a recovering person with me. Everything that I do needs to go through the filter of recovery.
Right.
And if I do that, then recovery becomes totally possible. But make no mistake about it, your recovery has to have as much importance in your life as your drug use did.
Right. And that was hard for me to understand in the beginning. I remember people told me years and years before I actually got sober and I had taken a peek at what recovery looked like and I'd gone to treatment or gone to meetings, people would tell me, well, what do you mean you can't get to a meeting? Did you get to the drug dealer's house?
Right.
And in that time I wasn't ready to get sober and it didn't make sense in my head. I'm
See,
like,
these people are
well,
stupid. It's not the same.
Is somebody going to give me a ride or something? Because I'm not taking a bus, you know? And then, you know,
right.
in hindsight,
You would've
I walked. If any of you know the valley, man, I trekked
That's right.
across the valley at 2 a.m. to get what I wanted.
Right.
So I looking back, I know I wasn't ready because it didn't make sense to me, you know, and it wasn't until what happened to me and sitting in jail and making that decision. And believe me, that wasn't a decision that was made for me. There was so much drugs in the jail. It would have been so much easier to just not think about my time in jail and get high and worry about it when I got out. But I made a conscious decision to go to whatever meetings they had, talk to whoever was recovering in the jail, read a book, talk to my family, get a sponsor that was writing me. It was an everyday decision to do something differently. And so that hopefully when I came home, I was prepared for the next step of my recovery.
So here's how that translates into right now. We got a couple of minutes left. Here's how that translates into right now. If you're listening to this show and you are personally want recovery, call. Cool, man. Right on. if you're a loved one and you are listening to this show and you have, I don't know, a 40-year-old who you're concerned about, and you're the parent of this 40-year-old that you're concerned about, and you've called and talked to us 3 or 4 times, and you are making all the arrangements for them, here's what we're going to say to you. We need to speak to your son or daughter personally to make sure that they have some investment in this recovery.
Right.
Because here's the deal. If they have no investment in the recovery, then it's not going to work.
Right.
The person who's in recovery has to have some investment in it. Now, it doesn't mean that they have to want it. It doesn't mean that it even has to be their idea. It means that they have to at least be willing to talk to a counselor, that they have to at least be willing to show up to those stupid meetings that you're making me go to.
Right, exactly.
Cool, right on. If that's the attitude, right on, man. Have them show up to the stupid meetings that you're making them go to. The point is showing up.
Right.
You know, if you're showing up, you get exposed to recovery and your attitude can change about it, right? But it's not going to happen if you're not doing the work. What that also translates into this, if you've called us and you have like Medi-Cal or something, and we don't take that type of insurance, but we've given you 3 other phone numbers to call.
Right.
You have to call those other phone numbers, and they may give you 3 other phone numbers to call.
Right.
And you have to call those phone numbers. You have to put in the effort to do it. If you've called and our treatment center, including ours, isn't getting back to you within 5 minutes of you calling, we're extremely all over the place right now.
Right.
We're busy. We're getting tons and tons and tons of calls. We can't always get back to you right away. Hang in there, we will. If you've called my phone and I'm not getting back to you, blow up my phone. Blow up my phone. Because sometimes I don't necessarily, but I do. I do.
And we pass messages along to each other. So if you're calling me and Bob calls you back, it's pretty
Cool,
much the
talk to
same
Bob.
thing. Yeah.
Or vice versa.
Yeah. If you call Bob and you get a call back from me, well, it's because we're both trying to do the best we can with what we have and help as many people as possible.
Because here's what the brain's going to want to do. It's going to want to pick and choose. If you need an inpatient treatment center and we send you to one, you say, it's not really in the area I want to go to. Then what you're doing is you're listening to the part of your brain that's trying to nitpick everything.
Right.
You take what's available and you say yes, and you have willingness to do everything that is put in front of you in order to sustain lasting recovery, and you will recover.
And our brain will also go, I need to talk to that specific person. I've had a lot of people I've called back say they only want to talk to Bob, and it's really difficult because if he's not available and you're getting a call back from me, it's going to do the same thing.
So call us at 661-296-4444. This is the Way Out Recovery Hour. We'll see everybody here next week. Bye.
Starting over and over and over and over.